One of the reasons why people have a tendency to embrace atheism, especially in our culture, is the problem of evil. They cannot reconcile sin, suffering, and death in their lives. They look about them and they see all of the carnage, all of the violence, all of the suffering, all of the problems, and they ask the question, who or what is going to save me from all this? And they have no answer. And so therefore they embrace that only which they can see and that which they can touch. It's all about the right now. And yet as Christians, we believe that Jesus Christ has come to reveal to us who God is and what God is all about. Who God is and what God is all about. And in the gospel today, Jesus reveals to his disciples, and he says to us that God makes his dwelling with us. The Greek word for dwelling is tabernacle. God tabernacles with us. And God tabernacles in us. And so as Christians, what is revealed to us is that sin, suffering, and death is reconciled in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus is the answer to all of the questions that the atheists can't answer for themselves. Jesus is the answer to the sin in the world. He took it upon himself. And when he died, the power of it died over you and I if we cooperate with grace. Jesus is the answer to suffering in this world because he teaches us that suffering transforms us if we unite our suffering with his. Living in a world that believes there's no value in suffering anymore. Jesus is the answer to death because his resurrection demonstrates clearly and definitively his power over life and death. And that kind of information, those beliefs, give us hope. Hope is not based on what you and I can see or touch, because if we could see it or touch it, we wouldn't need any hope. It would be present to us. Hope is about what we cannot see and what we cannot touch, but what we believe to be true. Because it is believed, it is revealed by God. And when youngsters are influenced in that particular way and manner, it has an effect on them. You know, I say Mass over at St. Charles for the sisters. And I'm pretty familiar with most of the kids there. And you know, a lot of these kids, when they come, they've got a lot of sorrow. But for the first time in their lives, because of the influence of the sisters, they experience love, they experience gentleness, they experience compassion, and they experience healing. And you know what else they experience? Jesus. Jesus. Because those sisters have an influence on those kids. And so everything is about Jesus. Jesus is incorporated into everything, see? And that has an effect on these kids. So I'll tell you a little story, okay, just about how the influence affects them. So after Mass one Saturday morning, one of the sisters had sacristan duties, and she was cleansing the precious and sacred vessels after I had purified them after Mass. And so she was taking care of one of the kids. And she began to explain to this little boy that Jesus touched those sacred vessels, and that's what made them special. And he responded by saying, "Oh, that's not special, sister." And then she pointed out that Jesus touched the chalice, and that's what made it special. And he said, "Oh, that's not special, sister. It's super special." Now, we laugh at that stuff because we say, "Oh, out of the mouths of babes." But I was reminded yesterday afternoon because someone came to me and said, reminded me of this story. And they told me that they were present for Mass that morning, and they were sitting out back after Mass. They were having a particularly bad day, kind of down on themselves. When we have lousy attitudes and outlooks. And as soon as he heard that, he said it brought tears to his eyes, and he said it changed my whole perspective and my whole day. You see the kind of influence it can have not only in children's lives, but our lives too. I'm glad that Lauren spoke before Mass about St. Elizabeth Seton School. Because I'm a believer, and I would suggest to you that one of the reasons why you and I are experiencing as many problems as we're experiencing out in the world today, because there is a direct correlation between what's going on out there and the decline of Catholic schools and the influence that Catholic schools have in the lives of people and children. I'm a product of Catholic schools. There are many people sitting in this church here this morning who are products of Catholic schools. I remember what I was taught in Catholic school. Oh, we complain about we had to go to confession, we had to go to Mass, but you know what? That had an influence and an effect in our lives, and it affects these children. I would invite you, as Lauren said, that on May 19th, when there's going to be an open house at St. Elizabeth Seton School, I would invite you to go to that open house and take a walk through and tell me what you see and tell me what you experience. Because every part of the curriculum, everything that they do there is infused with Jesus. I can guarantee you that's not happening in the public schools. And then take a walk through the public schools and see what you experience. Now, I'm not trying to demonize public schools. That's not the point. My brother is a superintendent of schools in Westbrook, Maine. And I know many teachers who come to me and who suffer because they can't say this and they can't do that. I don't think I have to convince you, again, of the kind of influence that Catholic schools have had in the lives of children. However, as much influence as Catholic schools have had, it's on the decline. And our bishop was here in January, and was here because he's trying to save schools. And he's chosen two: St. Elizabeth Seton School and a school in Litchfield. Not that the other schools aren't important, but he said, I'm focusing on those two right now. But we need to increase the enrollment. Because every time the enrollment goes down, guess what happens? The cost per pupil of education goes up. And it becomes more and more difficult to keep the bills paid and to keep our nose above the waterline. So there are people in this church this morning, and there are people that you know that may have in the past considered sending their children to St. Elizabeth Seton School, but said, well, we just can't afford it. Well, through the generosity of some people, we have some money. Some. And I would invite you and encourage you to apply. To apply. Because the more kids that we can get into that school and raise the rate of enrollment, we can decrease tuition. We're not in the business of making money. We're in the business of education. Maybe there are some of you parents and grandparents out there, and even people who don't even have any children. Would you consider gifting some student with a scholarship or a partial scholarship? I want you to think for a moment. You know, as I'm 62, and I sometimes like to think I'm still 42, but I'm 62, and mortality is becoming more and more of a reality in my life. But I want to remind all of us here this morning, when I look around at these youngsters, like this guy right here, that's the future. He is going to be making choices for me and you. He's going to be making decisions and choices that are going to directly affect my life and yours. And believe me when I tell you that a lot of the things that a lot of these kids are being taught and told today are utilitarian. Do you know what I mean by utilitarian? If you can use it, fine. If you can't, out. Doesn't have much to do with the dignity of the human person. I went to Manchester yesterday to hear confessions of teenagers who were on a day of retreat at St. Anselm College at Youth Fest. I was there with probably a dozen other priests. If you knew some of the problems that these kids are struggling with, you would say, how? Why? I don't understand. There is so much coming at these kids so fast, they don't even have time to switch gears. You and I, when we were growing up, I'm talking to the adults, when we were growing up, we had time to process stuff, see? But they don't. And it's coming at them at lightning speed. And they're being influenced by what's going on out there. There were two babies that were sitting in front here last night at the 4 o'clock Mass, and I thought to myself, what is their lives? And I know that the parents want to send them to St. Elizabeth Seton School. What will their lives be like with the influence of a Catholic education in their lives? What will their lives be like if there is no St. Elizabeth Seton School to help influence and teach the children? You see, it's going to impact all of us one way or another, whether we realize it or not. We have to save that school. We have to begin to recognize that there are some things that are worth sacrificing for. That's one of them. Somehow we have to come together as a community. I'm not talking about just this parish. I'm talking about as a community. And recognize the value of what that school is doing for Rochester. We have to create some sort of an endowment so that young people like this guy right here can go to school there if he wants to, if his parents want to send them. I remember, I went to Catholic school when it didn't cost you anything. You know why? Because we had all kinds of sisters like these right here who were teaching in the school and they worked for nothing. And now the teachers at St. Elizabeth Seton School are working for a third of the salary they could make in public school. That's a sacrifice too. That's a sacrifice too. All things are possible with God. And I believe in my heart that Jesus is going to save that school. And he's going to do it using us. But we have to cooperate. God tabernacles with us. God makes his dwelling with us. And he makes his dwelling in us. And when we know that, it changes things. It isn't special, it's super special. And it changes your outlook, changes your attitude, changes your life. God tabernacles with us.